The year 1908 in Providence, Rhode Island, was in many respects unremarkable. A city of industry and history, its cobblestone streets and Victorian architecture bore witness to the steady rhythm of life at the turn of the century. Factories hummed, horse-drawn carriages clattered, and the gas lamps flickered to life each evening, casting long shadows that danced with the whispers of the Atlantic wind. It was a city content in its predictable routines, its citizens tethered to the immutable laws of physics and time, as we all believed ourselves to be. Until the early hours of November 23rd. Between the impossibly precise hours of 2:03 a.m. and 2:07 a.m., a segment of the city simply emptied. Not with a bang, not with a struggle, but with an eerie, profound silence that defied every known principle of cause and effect. And the clocks melted. The first responders, disoriented and incredulous, were not privy to the cosmic horror that had unfurled itself with such surgical precision. Their initial calls were for a possible gas leak, a structural collapse, or perhaps a localized fire, reports filtered through by bewildered night watchmen and the few early risers who ventured into the strange, lifeless districts. But what they found was far more chilling than any conventional disaster. Homes stood open, doors ajar, windows unbroken. Meals lay half-eaten on dining tables, still warm in some instances, though rapidly cooling. Beds were unmade, newspapers lay unfolded. This was not an evacuation. This was an excision. The affected zone encompassed several blocks, primarily residential, though it also claimed a small commercial strip with a bustling bakery, a haberdashery, and a particularly popular tavern known as the Kraken's Coil. The geographical boundaries were unsettlingly crisp, as if drawn by an invisible hand. One side of a street might be bustling with life as normal, waking to the sound of milk carts and distant factory whistles, while the other side was a tomb of preserved absence. Detective Elias Thorne, a man whose career had been built on the solid bedrock of tangible evidence and logical deduction, was among the first senior officers to step into the heart of the anomaly. His initial reaction, documented in his official report and later in his increasingly desperate personal journals, was one of profound disorientation. It was as if the very air had forgotten how to resonate, he wrote. A silence that pressed in, not merely an absence of sound, but a positive, active quietude that seemed to absorb all light and hope. The evidence, or rather the lack of it, was the most damning testimony. There were no signs of struggle, no forced entry into any of the buildings, no bloodstains, no footprints other than those of the bewildered officers themselves. It was not a kidnapping, nor a mass murder, nor any crime Thorne had ever encountered. It was, instead, a profound, unanswerable question etched into the very fabric of reality. But then there were the clocks, every single timepiece within the affected zone. From the grand grandfather clocks in the Victorian parlours to the delicate pocket watches resting on nightstands. From the sturdy wall clocks in kitchens to the industrial timekeepers in the silent bakery, had undergone a grotesque transformation. They hadn't merely stopped, they had melted. Not charred by fire, nor fused by intense heat in the conventional sense, but distorted as if their internal mechanisms, their very purpose to mark the passage of time, had been irrevocably undone. Brass became pliable, glass warped and ran like viscous honey, and the hands of every single clock were fused together, perpetually fixed in a molten tableau, some pointing towards 2 as 03, others towards 2 as 07, and many simply congealed into shapeless metallic puddles. This detail, more than any other, sent a cold shiver down the spines of the investigating officers, and later the array of bewildered scientists and government officials who descended upon Providence. It spoke not of human agency, but of a violation of natural law itself. Time, that most fundamental and unyielding dimension, had been, for a fleeting 4 minutes, utterly dissolved. The witness statements from outside the immediate zone painted a picture of unsettling normalcy, followed by inexplicable terror. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, who lived just 2 blocks east of the Kraken's coil, reported waking at precisely 2 a.m. to a sudden, profound chill in her bedroom, despite a roaring fire in the hearth. She dismissed it as an old house draught. Mr. Silas Croft, a night watchman at a textile mill bordering the southern edge of the incident, claimed to have seen a brief, unearthly luminescence, a shimmering, almost gaseous distortion of the air itself directly over the affected district. He described it as like looking through a pane of glass that was also water and also nothing at all. But these were vague, easily dismissed anecdotes in isolation. Together they began to form a mosaic of cosmic unease. The animals, too, presented a peculiar mystery. Household pets, dogs, cats, caged birds, within the affected area were gone, vanished alongside their human companions. Yet stray cats and rats, typically nocturnal, were observed fleeing the zone with an unnatural urgency in the moments leading up to 2:03 a.m., according to later compiled reports from those who recalled seeing them. Their primal fear, untainted by human logic or superstition, seemed to resonate with an innate knowledge of impending doom. The absence of birdsong in the trees within the incident zone for days afterward was another subtle but deeply unsettling detail, noted by ornithologists who attributed it to an unknown disruption of the local ecosystem. Chief Inspector Howard Blackburn, a man known for his unflappable demeanour and his reliance on empirical data, found himself increasingly adrift in a sea of the unknown. His initial investigative efforts followed established protocols, canvassing the perimeter for stragglers, interviewing relatives and friends of the vanished, meticulously cataloguing the abandoned possessions. But every lead terminated in the same bewildering conclusion. Everyone was simply gone. No one had seen them leave. No one had heard a scream, a struggle, or a cry for help. Just 4 minutes of cosmic larceny, stealing an entire segment of humanity from the stage of existence. The official reports grew increasingly sterile, devoid of the initial bewilderment and fear that permeated the early days. They became exercises in cataloguing absence, listing names of the vanished and descriptions of the undisturbed homes they left behind. The human element, the lives abruptly truncated, seemed to fade behind the insurmountable wall of the inexplicable. Yet behind the official facade, whispers circulated. Junior officers reported strange dreams, waking with a pervasive sense of dread and an inability to shake the image of molten clock faces. One young constable, a man named Thomas O'Malley, resigned within a month, citing unbearable spiritual oppression, and moved to a remote farm in Vermont, never to speak of Providence again. The initial theories, however outlandish, were dutifully explored and discarded. A mass abduction by anarchists? Impossible, given the lack of struggle and the sheer scale. A collective delusion? Debunked by the physical evidence of the melted clocks and the undisturbed environment. A unique natural phenomenon, some heretofore unknown atmospheric event? Scientists, dispatched by a bewildered state government, struggled to fit the evidence into any known meteorological, geological or physical framework. The melted clocks, in particular, defied every explanation. If it were heat, the surroundings would be scorched. If it was some exotic form of radiation, there would be other, more conventional signs of its passage. But there was nothing. Only the lingering acrid smell of ozone, and something else, something metallic and utterly alien, that seemed to cling to the air like a ghost. As weeks turned into months, the Providence incident, or Case 1908, as it was officially designated, began to take on the chilling patina of myth. The national press, initially sensationalist, gradually pulled back, unable to sustain a narrative built on an absolute void. How do you report on something that simply isn't? The initial panic among the populace subsided, replaced by a pervasive low-level dread that settled over Providence like a perpetual fog. The affected zone was eventually cordoned off, deemed an unhealthy and potentially unstable environment by vague government decrees. The empty houses stood as silent, accusing monuments to an unknown horror, their windows like unseeing eyes staring out at a world that suddenly felt far less secure. It was in this atmosphere of quiet terror and official obfuscation that certain independent scholars, thinkers on the fringes of accepted academia, began to voice their own, far more disturbing hypotheses. Dr. Alistair Finch, a reclusive antiquarian with a peculiar interest in folklore and preternatural events, was among the first to publicly, albeit cautiously, suggest that the incident was not merely a physical phenomenon, but a metaphysical one. In a series of privately circulated essays, later suppressed, Finch posited that the event was a localized rupture in the continuum of time-space, a momentary weakening of the barriers between our reality and other more terrifying dimensions. Finch's theories, though ridiculed by mainstream science, found an unsettling resonance among those who had personally witnessed the aftermath. He spoke of non-Euclidean geometries and entities from beyond the veil of normal perception, concepts that felt absurdly abstract until one walked through the deserted streets of the incident zone, feeling the pressure of that profound, unnatural silence. The melted clocks, Finch argued, were not merely physical objects deformed, but symbols of time itself being momentarily unravelled, its threads pulled apart by forces utterly alien to our universe. He suggested that the vanished individuals were not destroyed, but rather reallocated, shifted, perhaps instantaneously to an alternate temporal or spatial locus, a place where the laws of our reality simply did not apply. This explanation, while horrifying in its implications, began to provide a chilling framework for understanding the utter inexplicability of the event. It suggested that humanity was not alone, not merely at the apex of its own understanding, but existed on a fragile island of known reality, surrounded by a vast, incomprehensible ocean of cosmic unknowns. The Providence incident was merely a brief, terrifying glimpse into that ocean's abyss. The government's response, predictably, was to stifle such speculation. Federal agents, taciturn and clad in dark suits, arrived in Providence within weeks of the incident. Their methods were precise and efficient, confiscating all unofficial documentation, interviewing and re-interviewing all witnesses, and systematically dismantling any narrative that veered from the mundane. They offered explanations ranging from a rogue scientific experiment gone awry, with no evidence of such a facility, to a mass hysteria event, again contradicted by physical evidence. Their ultimate goal was clear: to contain the narrative, to prevent the wider populace from contemplating the true, horrifying implications of what had transpired. But some things cannot be contained. The psychological toll on the city was immense. A subtle shift in the collective consciousness occurred. People became more wary of the night, more attuned to the fleeting shadows, more sensitive to unusual silences. The district itself, even after years, retained an aura of pervasive strangeness. Those who dared to venture inside reported feelings of profound vertigo, of disorientation, as if the ground beneath their feet were subtly unstable, or as if the air itself possessed a subtle metallic taste that lingered on the tongue. Children playing near the perimeter of the sealed-off area sometimes reported hearing faint, echoing whispers or seeing fleeting, impossible colours just beyond the line of sight. Case 1908 remained, officially, unsolved. The files grew thick with unanswered questions, with discarded hypotheses, and with the names of the disappeared, each one a stark reminder of the fragile nature of human existence. The police reports, stripped of their initial human terror, became cold, clinical accounts of a universe that had momentarily winked and shown its true, uncaring face. Detective Thorne, in his later years, retired from the force, haunted by the images of those melted clocks. He spent the rest of his life meticulously compiling a personal archive of anomalous events, searching for patterns, for connections, for any thread that might lead him back to the 4 minutes that shattered his understanding of reality. He never found it, but his tireless, obsessive work left behind a body of unofficial records far more revealing than anything sanctioned by the government. Thorne's private notes often returned to the same terrifying contemplation. What if the 4 minutes were not an event, but a process? What if the rupture was not a singular occurrence, but a momentary exposure to a continuous, unimaginable reality that ordinarily remains hidden from us? The melting clocks, then, were not merely a side effect, but a direct manifestation of this external reality impinging upon our own. A temporal distortion caused by proximity to something that does not operate within our universe's framework of time. Consider the implications. If time itself can be undone, warped or dissolved, what other fundamental laws are merely conventions of our limited perception? What other dimensions, what other entities, what other forms of existence press against the thin membrane of our reality, occasionally bleeding through in grotesque and incomprehensible ways? The Providence incident was a terrifying affirmation of humanity's cosmic insignificance, a reminder that our understanding of the universe is not just incomplete, but laughably naive. The legacy of Case 1908 is not just the vanished people or the sealed-off district. It is the insidious knowledge that something out there, something vast and ancient and utterly indifferent, can reach into our world, pluck individuals from their lives with the ease of plucking dust motes from the air, and leave behind only the chilling, melted testament of broken time. It is the realization that the universe is not the cozy, predictable place we imagine, but a sprawling, hostile expanse teeming with untold horrors, waiting just beyond the veil. Even today, well over a century later, the legend of the Providence incident persists, a dark undercurrent beneath the city's modern facade. Tour guides might tell sanitized versions, attributing it to a forgotten earthquake or a bizarre mass hypnosis. But for those who delve into the hushed archives, for those who recall the old tales passed down in whispers, the true horror remains. It's the story of the 4 minutes that proved time is not sacred, that reality is not fixed, and that sometimes the void stares back, not with malice, but with a terrifying cosmic emptiness. The sealed-off district eventually became a relic, then a curiosity, and finally a place of profound dread. Attempts to redevelop the area in later decades met with inexplicable failures. Machinery would malfunction, workers would report pervasive feelings of paranoia and nausea, and construction materials would mysteriously degrade overnight. One particularly ambitious project to erect a modern office building collapsed during its foundational phase, not due to structural weakness, but as if the very ground had subtly shifted, becoming less solid, less reliable. The city eventually conceded, declaring the area unsuitable for habitation or development, an official acknowledgement of the unearthly presence that lingered there. The Kraken's Coil Tavern, a focal point of the disappearances, became a particularly unsettling landmark within the zone. Through the dusty windows, one could still glimpse the untouched tables, the overturned chairs, the bar half-wiped clean. A few bottles of spirits, some of them still sealed, reportedly remained on the shelves, their labels faded, but their contents eerily preserved. It was a tableau of suspended life, a silent testament to an instant that never ended. And if one looked closely, near the entrance, where a large pendulum clock once stood, one might discern a hardened metallic puddle, frozen in time, reflecting the muted alien light that seemed to permeate the air. Dr. Finch, in his final, posthumously published manuscript, proposed a chilling hypothesis regarding the 4-minute window. He speculated that the specific duration, 2:03 to 2:07 a.m., was not arbitrary. It was, he believed, the precise interval during which the dimensional fabric was weakest, a cosmic breath or pulse where the barriers between realities thinned. He even dared to suggest that such windows might recur, perhaps across different points in space and time, offering glimpses or intrusions from the unfathomable beyond. His writings became deeply entwined with esoteric lore, often referencing ancient myths of thin places and threshold times, where the human world touched upon the realms of gods or demons. But Finch, with his rigorous if unconventional scholarship, always stressed the alien, indifferent nature of the force at work, far removed from human morality or mythology. The official response continued to be one of denial and erasure. Federal agencies established a quiet but pervasive network of information control, ensuring that any new evidence or speculation regarding Case 1908 was swiftly classified or dismissed as fringe paranoia. The goal was to protect the public from the shattering truth. that our perceived reality is a delicate construct, easily breached by forces utterly inimical to our existence. For governments and institutions, the maintenance of order and sanity relied upon the comforting illusion of a predictable universe. The Providence incident was a direct assault on that illusion. But knowledge, like a persistent mold, finds ways to spread. Through hushed conversations, through obscure academic papers circulated among a select few, through the increasingly popular pulp fiction that hinted at cosmic horrors lurking just beyond the mundane, the essence of the Providence incident seeped into the collective unconscious. It fueled the anxieties of a new century, an age grappling with the burgeoning revelations of science and the unsettling vastness of the cosmos. What did it feel like in those 4 minutes? Did the vanished experience a flash of impossible light, a moment of profound vertigo, a chilling sensation of being undone? Or was it nothing at all, a seamless transition from one state of being to another, a terrifying unbeing, without comprehension or resistance? The silence that followed offered no answers. Only the profound, unyielding silence of an entire population ripped from their temporal moorings, leaving behind only the ghost of their lives and the melted faces of their clocks, forever frozen in a moment that should never have been. The incident was a cosmic whisper, a brief, terrifying demonstration of forces that lie utterly beyond human grasp, reminding us that we are merely transient specks on a fragile planet, orbiting a sun in a galaxy that itself is but a fleck in an infinite, terrifyingly alive universe. The Providence Incident, Case 1908. A name, a date, and an eternal enigma. A scar on the very fabric of existence, warning us of the eldritch truths that lurk just beyond our sight, waiting for their own 4 minutes to arrive.